Miriam Joy, and welcome to my studio. I am really excited to present our new class to you. This is my Wire Gemstone Tree and Lamp Gourd class, and this is going to be so much fun. You're going to find out a lot of ways to do it. You're going to create a new one every time. We're going to show you a bunch of different examples and just have a lot of fun. I film my class DVDs in sections, and this is to help you kind of know where to stop and do that part of the gourd. Instead of taking you from start to finish and then you get ready to start it and you go, where do I start? What was the next step? So this takes you in steps naturally and gradually, and it really helps teach you a lot. I leave my mistakes in because if I have them happen to me, chances are you'll have them happen to you, so you can know how to fix them. So let's have a great time today. This is a project that you could do on a weekend day and just have a lot of fun with. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is talk about what type of gourd you can use to make this and then how to prepare it. I think to start out with, the first time, it's easier to use a half of a gourd or a bottom of a gourd to cut the circle out. And you want to leave it deep enough. And when I do this one, I use my 5th circle from the middle on my circle craft templates, and so you want to have at least 3 inches from here to this bottom part here so that it's not real fragile. And you could go ahead and just put that circle on, get about top of it, make sure it's even all the way around before you cut that. After you've cleaned that all out, then you can go ahead and cut your circle out, and then we'll go ahead and finish up the inside before we start on our project. Now there's a couple of different ways you can get this piece. If you have a circular gourd, you could cut it in half and you'd have one on the top and one on the bottom. You also could use this a martin gourd, a bottle gourd, a basketball gourd, anything that's round on top. Another thing that you could use is a canteen gourd and just cut it right down the center around, so you'd have 2 pieces there, as well as we'll talk about using whole gourds when we're done. It's just a little bit easier for this project when you're first starting to go ahead and do it with just a bottom piece. There's a lot less to deal with, especially with the wires. So that's kind of why I did it that way. So go ahead and cut your piece, cut your circle out, and we'll talk about the inside. I've cut my circle out, and now I'm going to go ahead and sand it on the inside until I get it nice and smooth. And then another thing I did is I came in and I sanded it just right along this very edge right here, because you can see a rough edge from the back. And then I turned it back and sanded it around one more time just to make sure it's kind of even all the way around. You want to go ahead and sand the edges so it lays flat to your project. And then on this one, I went ahead and spray painted it with flat black paint, because it's just going to kind of be in the background. Now, when you're doing your gourds, you want to make sure that they're not too thin. You don't want it to crack real easy or use a real thin gourd. On the same token, I wouldn't think I would want a very, very thick gourd, like one that's an inch or more. So you kind of want to have a nice size gourd. On this one, and on some of them, I used Mod Podge paper in the background, and a lot of times I'll use brown paper in the background. And this, putting the paper on with the Mod Podge just gives it that extra layer, making that gourd a little bit stronger. So at this time, go ahead and finish it up. If you want to go ahead and Mod Podge brown paper or mulberry paper or anything like that on, you can. And remember, the way we're going to finish it up today, you really will not see that. So that's the reason I went ahead and just used the black paint, and then we're going to go ahead and start dyeing our gourd. before we decide what color we're going to dye our gourd, we kind of need to decide what tree or look we're going for. And these are gemstone chip beads. We've got amethyst, we've got malachite, we've got coral, and I'm not quite sure. This is a green shell, what all the different names and the rest of them are. We do have a couple of them that are dyed, but they're really pretty. So if you're going to do a darker color, you want to put a lighter color on your gourd. If you're going to do a lighter color, you want to do a darker color. So kind of know which one you want to work with. We did go ahead and pick some of these up for you so you could have kits with these. And it's going to include 2 of each of the gemstone beads as well as a spool of wire, and that's so you can make one tree, and that should be more than enough for you. But that's kind of a look. So on this one I decided that I'm going to go ahead and use the red coral, and so I was going to do a lighter color gourd, and I'm going to show you how I color that with the alcohol inks. Once you've sanded the inside and the outside, go ahead and make sure you have cleaned, removed all of your mold and everything, but probably before you cut it, but go ahead and sand it just with a nice gentle coat. You don't have to sand it as much because we're not using leather dyes or ink dyes. We're using alcohol dyes, and those go on really well, but you want to make sure you remove any blemishes or scratches on your gourd. I'm going to go ahead and dye it with my Adirondack alcohol inks, and I'm going to be using 2 colors in this method, but you can do this with 1 color. You don't need to do 2. And again, your colors that you are using depends on what your stone color is going to be. I'm going to use caramel and latte on this example here. And the first thing I do, make sure you have your gloves on so you don't stain your hands. If you get any stain on, you can remove it with your alcohol. Your rubbing alcohol. But I'm going to pick the 2 of my lighter colors, and I put it on a cotton round, and I'm going to stain the entire gourd, so if I have any open areas, it's already got color on it. And I don't have to worry about filling everything in. And this color is really similar to the natural gourd color, which I like to do a lot of. It's leave my colors kind of natural. And now that we have that on, I'm going to come back in with a darker color first. And I'm going to work a section at a time. And I don't want it to roll too much. And I've also got my embossing gun or my heat tool with me. You don't have to use it, but it makes it go faster. And I'm going to put some larger dots, and I'm going to try to hold them up so they don't run real far. And sometimes when they're running where I don't want them to run, I'll hit them with that heat gun right away just to hold it in place. And I'm kind of making these a little bit bigger, and I'll come back in with my lighter color and do them smaller. And you can go ahead and do all the way around if you want to with this first. And so that guy's getting a little bit warm there. And people always ask us how we get the lines on the outside of the colors, but it's just the outside of the color. It also helps that you can heat it so when you put your thumb in it, you don't ruin it again. And then once we have that one all the way around, I'm going to come back in with a lighter color. And I'm going to do smaller dots this time. And if they're together and they bleed together, you don't get that dot as much. So try not to let them bleed together, and it ends up being more dotted. And the fuller the color is, the easier it is to get out in smaller dots. Just keep on going there. And you're just going to fill it in as much as you want to, and you can leave those, like that area right there, leave a little bit of it showing through. Don't worry about that. And sometimes if it's going too much, just pick that up with your cotton round. Now we're really getting that kind of where I want to have it. You see how we've kind of got that look going? That's what I'm really after. And another thing you can do, if you want to, you can leave it just like that. And you always should heat set it, even if you didn't use it, to kind of dry it at the end so that when you spray varnish or anything, it doesn't run on you. But we can also use a little bit of alcohol if you want to try it. If you like the look it is, just leave it. This is just regular rubbing alcohol in a spritzer. And see how that kind of just blends it that much more, and you kind of got all these little spots and stuff. You can either let it dry like that, or again, you can hit it with your heat gun. So go ahead and color your whole gourd and get that part done, and we'll talk about the next step. On the one I'm doing today, I use butterscotch and sunshine yellow, and I've got it all done. And then once it's done, come back in with black acrylic paint and just paint the inside. If you had a darker orange or something like this that you wanted to use instead of the black, you can do that. Black is just a fade into the background color. So if you wanted to use like a red or an orange, it was dark, you could put that there as well. Once that dries, go ahead and varnish it however you're comfortable with any type of varnish that you like. I went ahead and I used either the Krylon or the Rust-Oleum. I used gloss. Be careful in the winter when it's cold using satin. You can turn your gourd white, so just kind of be aware of that. Kind of gives it a cloudy color. Go ahead and varnish the inside to help keep that from flaking off and getting that black anywhere as well. So I would do 2 or 3 coats, nice coats on this, a minimum of that. Get it nice and dry, and then we'll show you how to start drilling our holes to put the tree in. We're going to talk about wire and the type of gauge or the size of gauge that we want. And 24 gauge is a really good one to start out with. It's easy to twist and manipulate the wire, either 24 or 26 gauge. The bigger the wire, the bigger your tree chunk is going to be. I like to use 22, but I wouldn't go as big as 20 gauge because it starts to get really thick and hard to twist. The smaller the number goes, so 18 gauge would be even thicker than this. So anything over 22, anything under 22 I would probably not use. I would probably stick with 24, 22 through 26, 28. 28 starting to get a little bit small. But you could use whatever color you want. They've got the gold and the copper and the silver. Silver is probably the most popular and the easiest to find, but know that you do have other options if you really think that one would really stand out over another color of wire. Now, on my trees, I wanted to get at least 12 to 14 holes in the trunk, so to get a nice thick trunk up here, holes in the bottom of the roots, excuse me. But see how this one is kind of straight across? I don't want them more straight across, I kind of want them more coming up, and I'll show you what I mean with that one. See how this one is not quite straight across and it's coming more up. So I'm going to think about that size from there to there. And we're going to decide which part you want the top of your piece. And what I kind of did, this got cut, so this is a little bit more narrow and this is a little bit thicker. So I'm going to make this my tree trunk down here. And I'm going to make this my tree part up there, and I don't want those straight across, so those are a little bit more pointed, so I think that looks really good. So I want to kind of work between that area and that area. I'm going to kind of compare here, see if I've got it kind of close to what I had before. I think I could go a little bit bigger. And another thing to do is just kind of compare. We don't want that straight across there, but I still think we have a little wiggle room. So we'll do it right about there, because I want to get 14 in instead of 12. And if you want to measure this area and divide it off, go ahead. I just like to eyeball it. And I bring these about 1/4 of an inch out. You want them out far enough that you're not going to crack the gourd. You want them close enough but not too close that you don't have the stability. If they're too close, they're also going to break in between as well. And like I said, feel free to measure these out. You want to eyeball it, you can. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Perfect. This one I'm going to move just a tad over. Alright, so we've got those all lined up. So go ahead and get those measured up, and then we're going to come back and we're going to drill those. I'm using the Gourd drill, and this is from the caning shop, and this is a really nice little drill because I like how small it is and I can hold it with my hands, and I also can change the speed up or down on it as well. And I'm probably using about a 1/16 drill. You want a pretty small drill, but you want it big enough that you're probably able to stick 2 or 3 wires into it comfortably, and when you're putting just one wire in, it just goes nice and easy. Your hole should never be too big that the wire's wiggling all the way around, or vice versa, small that you're having to pull the wire real hard through the hole. So I'm just going to drill these straight down. You should even wear your mask even when you're just drilling the holes, because you're still working with gourd dust. I'm going to go ahead and finish up all the way around, and then we'll start cutting our wire. And remember, when you're working with these are roots, and they don't have to be exactly perfect. You can have them closer together, farther apart in areas, and closer together, however you want to do it, however you see it. I kind of keep my roots a little bit more even than I do my top, but that's just how I do it. You may see it totally different. And we talked about how the wire fits in that hole nice and easy, and I could still get probably 2 or 3 wires in there with that, just in case you want to do that up at the top, and we'll talk about that when we get more towards there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my wires for these now. I did 14 holes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure 3 times across the width of the hole that my tree will be. So 1, 2, 3. Now that's half of my hole, or my tree part there, and so we're actually going to have another half. So it's actually kind of like 6 times, because when you put it into a hole, you're going to have a wire on each side of that coming out. So instead of really actually 14, it's actually like 28 wires. So we cut our first one, so we're going to go ahead and measure off our second one. And since we're dividing these in half, we just need one for each hole, so that's a total of 14. And I'm using the 24 gauge on this project. And stick with your main wire, because if you cut one shorter and keep going shorter and shorter, you'll end up with real short ones. But if you keep your main one, you should keep pretty consistent. And I'm going to go ahead and continue to cut all of these. And once we've cut these all, we're going to show you how to put them on. We've got our wire all cut, and we're going to go ahead and start putting it on. So we're going to go into each hole and pull this so we meet kind of even. And then I'm going to go back to the hole. I'm going to press that with my fingers so that's tight up against the gourd, and you don't have it sticking out. It's kind of nicely tucked in. And we're going to decide on which direction we're going to turn all of our wire. And I usually turn mine to the left. I don't know why, that's just what I do. So from now on, I'm going to turn everything to the left. And I'm going to pull this nice and tight. I kind of want it in the middle of the gourd right there, and then we're going to just start turning that and get that as tight as we can. And another thing I do to make that even a little bit tighter is I take my tweezers, or my pliers, excuse me, and I go up to that area and I turn that even tighter so it's not slipping around. You do not want it so tight that it actually cracks the gourd. You're putting so much pressure on it that it cracks the gourd. So we're going to bring that up just a little bit. Now when I'm working with the wire, this is nice and straight. And roots in wood are not straight. So I'm trying not to bend this part anymore, but I'm turning it so that the wire down here is kind of making itself kind of bent. See how we kind of turn that into a bent piece instead of a straight piece? So now that I'm done with that first one, I'm going to take my clip, pick up any clip that's big enough to go onto your gourd, and we're going to hold that wire in place while we start our next one. We're going to do the same thing here. Get that even. And push that down. Turn to the left, get that nice and tight up against that center gourd piece. And try to turn both the pieces of wire so that you don't have one going around the other, so they're both kind of turning, if at all possible. If it's not going that way, that's okay. I'm going to get my pliers in here, that nice and tight, and I try and bend this guy just a little bit so that he's not straight. Now that wire started going back down, and I don't want that. So we got to get him going more towards the top. Now, I've got those two, and these are two pieces of root. They're going to join up with the bigger part of the root, so they're about the same size. So what I did is I took one wire from each side. So I have one wire from this one and one wire from this one, and then the same with the other. So these two should meet right there, right next to each other. If you need to do a couple more loops, then do a couple more loops to get them right there. But once they're together, then twist them together. Now you're going to start to see why it's easier to do this tree on the gourd piece or half that we've chosen to use instead of a full gourd. Once you get comfortable with the method and working around the wires, then you definitely can start thinking about doing it on a full gourd. And there's some other things we'll talk about when we get there. So I've kind of got this guy a little bit twisted. I don't want that guy quite twisted down there. So we're going to take him and bring him over. Now I want you to kind of think about how many holes we have and how many you want to bring together in a grouping. On this one I did 2, on the next one I did 3, I did 2 and 2 and 3 and 2. So however you think they should go. If you think all of them should be 2, then do it that way. To me that's too even. You could do all of them in 3s. Just however you see it going, just start thinking about that. There's all types of things when we start to get the wire up a little bit higher that we'll talk about as well. But we're just going to go ahead and do the first grouping of wire. So we'll do this one. Now we're going to just do these guys all the way across. We're combining them just like we have done here. So I'm going to go ahead and do this next section with 3 right here, and then I'm going to come back and show you that, and we'll go from there. Now make sure you tie these over on the side with your clip as you're working here, but I want to kind of show you, I've got these 3 now, and I've kind of decided where I want them to meet up. But as you can see, the twisted parts are not meeting up. So we've got to make those a little bit longer to make them meet up. The side ones probably will be a little bit more than the middle one. I'm going to bring that middle one in just a little bit, though I noticed it. Now, kind of compare. Funnest parts is going to be trying to learn how to use your wire. When you're not using these, keep them off to the side. Your life is going to be a whole lot easier. And don't twist your wire so much that you break the wire off. That's real important as well. If you do that, just tuck it in, end it, just keep on going. And if you need to reattach it, just twist it around and bring it back in. There's not a big deal if that should happen to you. And the 3 times the wire should just be a little wiggle room for you. You'd rather have too much wire than not enough. I think it takes about 2.5 times the tree size to make it that way, but sometimes one will end up a little bit shorter. And you can always trade him off for a longer one if you're at a point where you're still twisting. Now what I'm doing is I'm laying these one over each other, and because I'm going to the left, I want to stick the left one in the back. And again, they should all kind of meet right up there. And I have one of the wires from each of these on each side, so that when I twist, they're all together. And I should have this guy down so I don't get into him. And try and twist them both the same so that one is not the one going completely around the other wire, that they're both twisting. And we want to kind of start thinking about where they will meet up with this one here. So we've kind of done that one. So now I'm going to go ahead and again do 2 more right here, just like we did our first one. And I'm going to go ahead and do that just go ahead and start thinking about in groups of 2 and 3 all the way across, however you want to do the combination, or like we talked about earlier. And I'm going to take them up to where we join them in groups. I'm probably about 1/2 inch, so they're kind of almost the same all the way across, and then we'll talk about combining them from there. Make sure while you're still working across it, each section you bring over and clip away from the wires that you're working on. Even when you have this one done, you can clip it while you work on this one. Another thing, it might be really suggested to wear safety goggles. That'll kind of help in case your wires get a little bit out of control there, but helping them with the clip really helps a lot. So another thing I suggest, if you don't quite know where you're going, take a piece of paper and draw it out, and then you can kind of follow it. Each tree you're going to do, you're going to say, oh, I'd like to try this different this time. So, but to kind of give you a guideline. Another thing I kind of want you to think about is dividing this into thirds. We want a third for the root, a third for the trunk of the tree, and then up here with all of our leaves, let's call them, with our gemstones. So we want to kind of think about that as well. Now on this one, I'm going to bring this next section in together. So those would actually meet up right about there, and then we're going to do that into the into the trunk, excuse me. And I'm going to do each of those together, so I'm coming up with 3 on this next batch of wire, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. But you may decide that you want to do something different. On this one, I brought the first 2 together, and then I brought 3 together here, and then brought these guys in over here just by themselves. Meaning this one we'd already joined up. But there, you can do this in a combination of any type that you want. Each tree you could do a little different. So just start thinking about those kind of things. If you're going to do a 4 seasons gourd, which I want to do, have your tree always be the same, because it's supposed to be the same tree for the same season. So think about that if you're making a 4 seasons tree. So now that we've got them at that level, like I said, on this level, I'm going to be just taking them into 3 sections. These two, and these 2. And that's what I mean by the 3 sections. So I'm going to put this guy over here and see if these 2 meet up. And I need to do this guy just a little bit. Couple more times here. Don't be afraid to clip that guy down too if you need to. And remember, we want our roots kind of twisted. Trees usually don't grow real straight. So we're going to twist that just a little bit more, and then we're going to meet those up. And again, we're going to divide half of the wire from each one of those off, so we have them in 2 sections. And nice and tight next to each other, and twist those together. And we're going to head towards the middle of this where I want to meet up with the trunk. Now on this guy, I wanted him off-centered, so I brought him over more towards here. So that is something to think about as well. Instead of bringing him right towards the middle, this one went a lot longer. This guy was really short, and this guy was kind of medium, to give him more towards the side on that look. So I'm going to stop with him. I'm going to do my next one. We don't want these much higher than that, because remember we talked about dividing our gourd into 3s. When you're working with nature to make it more appealing, you should always kind of do things odd instead of even. And we could use a second clip over here. And just look for your clips. I think I found my clips at the Dollar Tree. They were in a package. I think I got 5 or 6 for $1. Okay, got each of those on there, and I'm going to start to twist those up. Try and keeping them out of the other wires. That's the fun part. But it really, really, really helps if you have the other wires tucked down. Remember, we try to kind of keep that kind of curved, not straight, so that's pretty good. So I'm going to go to my last one here. And those two look pretty even. Get them half and half. That's another reason you want to make sure your gourd is varnished really, really well. You don't want to scratch it with your wires. Don't want your design scratched. And each time you do it, it's going to get easier and easier. And like I said, I found different things I would like to do each time I've done it, different next time. So I've kind of got these guys in the middle, and this guy is still needs a few more turns to catch up with them. Don't do that too hard. You don't want to break your gourd. Try and keep both of those twisting. It'll be a little bit harder when we get it to the trunk here. I think you need a couple more turns. Okay. Now, on the trunk, you can try dividing it off into halves. If you don't get them in halves, that's okay. It's kind of, you've kind of got them into bunches. You want to do a smaller amount that's going to go around the outside more you can at this point in time. Again, I'm doing them all bunched up together. Now I found when I'm doing the trunk, because the wires are so thick, you're usually just going to have one batch that's going to go around, and you're not going to get them twisted as much like that. And that's okay. If you can, that's fine. That's our new company guard dog. So we've kind of got that right there, and I'm going to do a few more twists just to see if I can get it to curve a little more. And then we're going to start talking about how we want to branch this off at the top. And I think I want to bring a lower limb like I did this first one here and kind of bring him out. Now you want to make sure that you leave enough room that you have the stones on. You don't want to twist the wire clear up to the edge and not have any room to put the stones on, because you want those to really show up. So, and I didn't drill my holes in here. Now remember, you have 14 down here, but those are doubles, so you're going to have 28 up here, unless you put some in the same holes, and we'll talk about that later. But I want to do a branch off to the side here, and I don't want it half of my wire. I only want it some of my wire. So I'm going to pick what's on the outside, and I think 6 is about right for what I want. And so I'm going to divide that into 3 and 3. And start twisting these. And I do like some of it the wire to show. I don't want so much stones that you don't see any of the top branches when you get up here. So we've got that a little bit, but now I want to kind of twist it maybe even into smaller guys. So I'm going to do 4 and 2 on this one. And there is no right or wrong, it's just kind of how you would see this. So I'm going to take this first one and I'm going to branch it off into 2. Now remember, we still want our stones to show. And I'm going to branch this other one off first into 4, so it's got 2 on each side. And then I'm going to branch it off into 2 from there. And I'm probably going to have that guy down on the bottom more. So, like I said, if this gets a little bit confusing, draw it out on the paper and then use that as directions to follow. And you don't have to even do all of this. You can stop and put the stones on it and get that part anchored. So that's probably a nice right there, just the way that is. And what I mean by stopping and drawing it, my pencil ran away. So we've got this trunk coming out, and we're bringing out this branch, and we talked about taking, we've got the 2 here, and so it's going to end up branching out like that. And then we've got the 4 here. We're going to divide it into 2 first, and then those will each go onto the tree. So if that helps you to draw it out exactly like you're doing that, then go ahead and do that. Do whatever you're comfortable with. Now, another thing I have done in the past is if you didn't know where to do the holes and you were more comfortable putting them in first, go ahead and drill all of the holes and then just aim for those holes. Now I like this one, I want it a little bit low, and then I want some space in between the next batch. So that's the reason I didn't pre-drill the holes in this one. So go ahead and work that area up, and then we're going to start adding some of the holes and putting those on. If you decide to go ahead and put the lamp into the piece, you may want to think about gemstones that kind of shine the light through this. These kind of shine more than the red that I'm going to be working with. And I also kind of want to point out this is kind of a different wire technique, and we'll show you how to do that as well. But we're going to start with our red coral beads, and it's going to take just a little over usually 2 strands. One of the things that you want to make sure of is the beads aren't too big. You don't want them too big, and you probably don't want them too small, but you've also got to make sure that they go into the wire, that the drill hole is big enough that they fit onto the wire. Now some of these also have a couple of holes in them, so don't be surprised if there's a couple of holes in them as well. So those fit really, really well. If you have bigger ones that kind of stagger big and little, you probably want to put the bigger beads closer to the end here and the smaller ones more towards the end where the tree would get smaller itself. So I'm going to go ahead and straighten my wire, And these pliers, you can find these in the jewelry department. They have the plastic part on them, and you can straighten out your wire if you need to, and that kind of comes in handy. Remember, we talked about having that bigger piece on the bottom. And the longest part is stringing these. And we're going to talk about a couple of different ways to tie these off. I like the red with kind of the reddish tones of the alcohol inks. And I'm going to try and use some smaller ones here. And you can see I have plenty of wire left over on this one, and that's okay. You'll find areas where you're not going to have as much wire. And I'm going to see how many more I need to add here. You always kind of want to push it down, but you also want to turn the beads, because there's going to be areas that they're going to kind of sit in between each other better once you turn them. They'll kind of position themselves. And I'm going to see where this hole is going over here. And make sure I have this up. I don't want it going down. So I'm going to drill this hole. Probably better to have better control of that when you're drilling. Now, there's a couple of things we can do, and I'm going to kind of explain both of them. If you were working on a bigger piece, it was a solid gourd, and you didn't have the top cut open where you could get behind it, you would want to do a method where you pull this down, and you want to make sure that you have as many beads as you need to get to this edge part right here. Again, we'd kind of flatten that down, and I would take this wire back over, and you would wrap it 2 times around and trim it in the back, and it should be nice and tight. Now, when you're working with a bunch of these, it is very hard to get in here, and that is kind of a harder one to do. So I don't recommend starting out with that, but you can do that if you get into a full gourd where you don't want to cut the rim off. And so we're going to do a little bit different technique. We're going to add the beads all the way to the hole. And I'll show you that technique again when I show you kind of how to do the purple kind of wisteria looking ones. So don't worry about not quite understanding that yet, but I kind of want to know that you have options. A lot of times I'll just pour my beads out. And we're going to put those right here. Now I want to talk to you about kind of having your beads higher and lower. When I did this one, I kept all of my beads basically the same size, and you can see how we're taking them clear up till we're going into the hole, and that's what I'm going to be showing you today. But when I came back and did my second one, I tried to do layers so that the tree looked more full, so it looked more natural. So I would do one lower and one higher, one lower and one higher, to kind of give them a, like I said, more textured look. And I think that just added so much more to that. And so we want to bring this first branch down, and I thought I needed a little bit more beads than I did here. So right about there. And so now I'm going to push this guy into the hole. and I'm going to pull it from the back. And that's why working with this type makes it so much easier. So I have that wire, and if your wire's long enough, you can just clip that back. If it's not and it's shorter, just kind of twist it just for a little bit, because we're going to tie it off to the next one. It's not a big deal, but we just want it to be a little bit more secure till we get that next one in. So we're going to go ahead and start on this next one here. And again, we want the bigger beads towards the bottom of the branches. And I do this part when I'm watching TV or something like that, because it takes a little bit longer. Now remember, on this one, I want this to be higher. Excuse me. And you've also got to start thinking about, we've got to get 28 holes and branches up on this piece. So this one I'm bending up higher, and I'm going to put it close to that other one. So I've got this one taller, and I want this pretty close, because remember, we still got to get those 28 in here. So I'm going to stop and drill that one. And we're going to put this guy in. Okay, now that we've got this guy back here, we have two of them, and they're nice and tight, so we can take these and we can twist them together. And this is going to secure both of those. And you want to make sure that they're nice and tight, they're not loose. And I take my wire and twist it up 1/4 to 1/2 inch. It's probably a little bit exceeded, but that's also can lay it down nicer if it's a little bit longer than if it's too short. And I'm going to go ahead and trim those ends so that they are out of the way and I don't have to worry about that. Now I can start to see this kind of unfolding here. So what I'm going to do on these two, and sometimes when I kind of see it unfolding, I'll go ahead and put think about where I want my holes. Now these two, these are going to be lower. And I'm going to put one there and one there. Now I'm going to bring these two up. They're going to be higher, so they're going to be up on top. And I'm going to put them in between those two. So those are kind of pretty well all even right there. I think got that one and that one. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to let it go over here. And I may take one and bring it back over that direction. I'm not quite sure yet, but just kind of play with it. So on these, I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes, and I'm going to go ahead and put those beads on. And then once I get those on, I'm going to come back and we'll talk about that some more. Alright, see the different layers I've got here? I've got some behind and some on top, so that's looking really good. And I twisted these behind, and I'm having just about perfect amount of wire left over, because if it was much smaller than this, it would be really hard to twist and work. So this is just finishing about just right. So what I want to do here is I want to twist this one a couple more times up, so this one makes sure that it looks like it's taking off a little bit lower, and that's perfect. And we're going to think about how we're dividing our other part. And I'm probably going to take this batch up just like I have it right there, and this batch to the side. I've still got 22 wires that I've got to attach. So at this point in time, I think I'm just going to start drawing these on, and then knowing what I need to drill to and filling that in from there. So these are going to come over, as long as those are separated there, they still look lower. I might try to leave that one a little bit, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I've got these too far apart. So this is kind of why I want to do this with you, so you know, because we've got, like we said, 22 still to do. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And see, I don't want them any lower than that right there. So that's kind of the reason I'm drawing this in, is so I can think about it. We've only got 15, 16, 17. We still need a few more. So I'm going to even have to take those a little bit closer together. And I'm glad you're kind of seeing this. This is the reason I leave stuff like this in, is so that if I do it, you may know that you have to do it too. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I still got to get a few more than that. So I'm going to go ahead and get the dots on and drill that out and just figure that out, and then we'll start from there. I wanted to go ahead and show you while I still have the white. What I actually did was go and put a couple of them back behind that first row, just a tad. And this may be the reason you want to figure it out and drill before you start bringing the branches up, just so you know where you're aiming for. That may be a lot easier for you. Whatever works, but I wanted you to kind of be aware of how you could kind of drill the holes as you were going, or you could have them all marked out and go straight from there. Now, if you were doing this method of tying it off, I definitely say measure it out first. And the smaller your hole, the less you may want to use of these. Instead of using 14, you may want to go to 12. The smaller the tree, the less you would have. If you were doing a real small one, you might go to 8 or 10. The bigger you got, the more wire you would want to do. So if your hole got bigger and you were doing a bigger tree, you're going to want to add more wire on down here. But then you may be able to space it out a little bit more on top. So that just kind of tells you how you need to be looking at drilling your holes. Keep your holes at least a 1/4 inch back from the rim. And I'm going to go ahead and get those drilled, and then we're going to start working from there. Okay, I got all those holes drilled in here, so now we're going to kind of start aiming for those. Now, I had this smaller part already separated, so I'm just going to kind of divide it. And I kind of do it evenly, but you don't have to. If you'd rather have 3 and 5, that's fine. Just, it's easier for me to think even instead of odd. We're going to start twisting this guy. I've got one here and one here that I want to aim for. And that's kind of how you're going to do it once you get those pre-drill holes, is you're going to start aiming for and thinking about getting towards those holes. Now I've got that one. Now I want to split this off again, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to split this guy off into 2s. So let's get him divided up. And sometimes I've even done all of the wire twisting of the tree and then added the stones. Whatever's easier for you, there is no right or wrong. Just remember, if he starts to get too short, and you're going to lose your wire, you don't want to keep twisting him. If you can switch him out for a longer wire, that's fine too. So I'm going to do this guy just a little bit right here. Twist him a couple times. And we don't want to have him so twisted that we don't have any stones for him. So I'm going to have this guy go here, and that one probably down there. And you can go under these guys. You don't have to go over them, whatever you're comfortable with. So we're going to go ahead and put one on him. So I'm going to go ahead and put those two in. And then after I get those two, we'll come back and talk about the next two. I went ahead and did the 2 bunches, and don't worry if you have to skip a wire or hole to tie the wire off. Just make sure they're nice and tight. Get those down as far as you can. And then I'm going to start on the next batch. And again, divide this off into 2s. Or however you want to divide it. I like to do 2, so I always end up with really 2 on the very end instead of just one single wire that wouldn't get twisted at all. And I'm going to twist these guys a little bit, and I'm going to do these 2 on the bottom. And I think I'm just going to leave those guys right there and fill them up so that there's more stone up here. We're not losing a lot of that stone. So we'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to take those 2 to the bottom and the other 2 high. Okay, so we've done this section and this section. So we're going to make our 3rd section. So I've divided these wires off again. And we're going to twist them again. And just when we get to certain areas, we'll start branching some of them off. Try and keep those from tangling up there. So I'm going to branch a couple of these off up here. Do 4 up in this direction. So 2 and 2. And I'm going to go ahead and probably twist all my wire now. Just kind of take it all going. This guy, I don't want him straight. I'm going to try and get him tighter. There, we got some bend to him. Then I'm going to take him off into his 2s. Got that guy. I'm going to do this guy, and I'm not going to do him quite as much. It'll be either a high one or a low one. So I've kind of got that area. I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to twist these a little bit more before I branch them off again. It looks like the branch is going on down here. And I probably am going to break off a smaller one from here. Make this one go down to my bottom 2 holes on the right side. Get some tight bend in there. So we've got those guys coming in, so that's good. Bend this just a little bit more. And remember, you always can take them up too. You don't have to take them just across. They can come up as well. So let's bend this guy, divide him off again. If you're noticing your wires are getting too short, then don't twist them as much. If you've done it right and you've got the right size hole compared to your wire, you should be just fine. And I'm going to divide this guy. So we've really kind of brought him into 3 sections here, and we've kind of got him looping this way. I didn't intentionally set out to do it, but I wanted this branch lower, so that's kind of how we have come out. But I really do like the look. If you didn't like something too, or you wanted to add, you could always twist a wire into it and pull another branch in. Just remember, you'd have to have the holes for them in the end, so you'd have to add more holes, so think about that, because sometimes that would be a deciding factor as well. So we've got this going here. And so I'm just going to finish twisting these off in 2s, adding my stones, and go ahead and hook those into the holes. I'm going to make sure I have low and high ones, and then once we get that all done, we'll check in with you and show you where we're at. I kind of wanted to show you that you don't have to make one lay next to each other, and that's kind of good if you didn't like these 2 I have going up here. I have them one here and one here, and I still have a hole right here I need to fill, and I'm taking this wire clear from over here and going to fill that in, and it's going to help fill in red in the back. You want to make sure that you don't cover up all of your twigs or your branches too, but that kind of just gives you an idea. And these 2, instead of putting them next, these 2 are going to go on the top, clear over on this side, to kind of move that around as well. So I kind of wanted you to see that I'm just not lining them up side by side by side, and I'm kind of moving those around. And you can even go under or through some of the ones that we've already done if you want to as well. Just think outside of the box when you're putting these in and just not lining them up perfectly. I've got all of the beads on, and we've got them placed onto our tree, but remember how we talked about how you can move them around? You can still move them around even after we're done. So if you decide that you want more area between some, or some coming down further, some going back further, just move those around until you like what your design is. You still have that ability to do that. So, and if you wanted to add one even, say right here, just take a wire, twist it in half, wrap it around there, wrap it up, and then pull it into here, and you still can do that. Now, I didn't want mine too symmetrical. You want to remember we talked about not being too perfect. I also wanted to show you, I still had quite a few beads left over. So we did really good. This was our second batch, and those were 36-inch beads. And this is my leftover from the wire, and I think that was just perfect. We didn't have too much, not too short. I had, my shortest one was about that much after I got done twisting it to the back. So we did really good with our wire. That was just about the right amount. Now this is our purple flowering tree, or wisteria kind of looking tree or plant, and I'm going to show you how I did this just a little bit differently. We did it exactly the same until we get to the very end of the branches, and as you can notice, I don't have that many holes up here. I probably maybe have 10 or 12 at the most. So what we're going to do is on these branches that we're taking out, we're going to start twisting them out. Again, remember, you're going to the left, so I'm going to take them to the left. And we're going to keep dropping off the different branches to make our hanging down branches. You could also do this with green to kind of mimic a willow or something like that. So I'm going to start with this first one. I'm going to pick this one that's up on top. You've got to make sure that you have at least 3 inches on this last one here. And I'm going to start putting my stones on. I'm going to do the same as I did with the big ones, or the other ones, the big ones at the bottom. And just work my way up a couple of inches until I feel that that is long enough. Okay, I've got my beads on this one, and I kind of see how far they hang down, and that looks just about right. It's probably about 1.5 inches or 2. And I use smaller ones near the ends, and if you have some lighter colored ones or white colored ones, use those at the very end. And I took my finger and I placed it right there, and I cut the wire up above that. And we've twisted these to make them nice and tight. And then I'm going to take my, you could use bottlenose tweezers or pliers or whatever you want to use. I'm using some that I like working better because they've got a little bit of a grip. And I'm just twisting my wire down in a circle. That is all I am doing, just like that, till they're nice and tight up against that stone. And then those hang down just like that. Now we're just going to keep on going here. So now we're down to 3. So we're going to twist those up till the next stop. So we've got that going, and I've got my 1 twisting on the outside instead of the 2 twisting together, but that's okay. As we can see here, now we don't want to go too far because remember we've got to do a few more of these. So we're going to drop one off again, and I'm going to drop this guy, the one that we've been twisting with, off. And I'm going to get rid of a little bit of him so we don't have to go over quite as much of the stones. And these guys are going to get bent and stuff until we're done, and that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put my beads on this one. So we've got this guy filled up with beads, and we're going to do the same thing again. And twist our wire down nice and tight on the rocks. Sometimes with the amethyst you can have a chip that'll come off, and that's okay. Just make it nice and tight, but you don't want it too tight that you're breaking those because they're a little bit more fragile than like the coral that I was working with a little bit earlier. Just so you know, if that happens to you, that's kind of normal. It's going to depend on the rock and the bead, where the bead's cut, and all that kind of fun stuff. So, and this doesn't need to be perfect. We're not trying to make it perfect. We're just trying to get that nice and tight and kind of tucked in. I'll go back and grab that one. Okay, so we're going to go on to our next one here. We're down to 2 wires. We're going to twist again. Now remember, we don't want the final one all the way up to the thing. We want a little bit of stone on it before we get it there. So I want that about there, but I want to twist it so it's a little bit more twisted up and a little bit not quite as straight. So I'm going to go ahead and put stones on this rock, and then we'll talk about our last one. So we finished up this guy, and our last wire, we kind of decided where we wanted it to go. So I'm going to put it there, and I went ahead and drilled my last hole, and I put my beads up until the very edge of that piece of the gourd, and then I'm going to stick this down through. And if my hands get in the way, let me know. And we're going to pull this through. And this is one of the ones we were talking about tying off where you don't see the wires on the back. This is another example of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this. The bead or the stone should be on the inside of the gourd cutout. You shouldn't have any up here where the wire is. And you want to bring this wire up nice and tight. And if you need to bring your pliers in and bring that in tighter, then go ahead and do that. because it kind of wants to not bend straight. So there we go. Get that nice and tight. So we're going to twist it around once. And you want this nice and tight. You don't want your stones moving at all. And then twice. Now, if you were doing the other tree, you would cut it off there and leave it like that, but we're kind of doing that weeping willow effect, so we're going to leave that on there, and we're going to bring this, fill this up again with stones, and then have that part weeping down just like these edges right here. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up, or you go ahead and finish up with that, and then we'll do that last little part. Alright, I went ahead and finished up our last little kind of weeping limb there, and I'm just straightening these out. And you will smash them down when you're going. You should have some up on the top layer, and you should have some down at the bottom. I kind of have these more at the bottom and the top more coming over the top, which I kind of think they should do. Now, I will tell you a couple of things that I would do different. When doing this tree, in the beginning we measured out 3 links for a total of 6. I would do one more for 7, because I did run out of wire up at the very top in a couple of places, because we're using a little bit more because we're coming back down. But if you ran out of wire, you could just put your wire right around it, wrap it, and just start anew, is what I did with a couple of these. So it's not quite that big of a deal, but isn't that really, really pretty how that turned out? So those are a couple of things to think about. So go ahead and get that finished up, and then we're going to talk about material for the background. Before we get in the background, I want to talk to you about the wires. Now, this is what the inside of a gourd looks like with the wires that are nice and clean, so you wouldn't have to worry about the wire showing anywhere. And this is the one that we just did. You've got these wires, and once you get the back covered up, they're not going to show anyway. But another thing you could do, if you were going to go to competition and you were worried about this, you can come in here and cover this all up with clay. It's going to do 2 things. It's going to cover up your wires. Now you're going to have a little bit thicker where your wires are, but it's also going to make it a lot more stable and not worry about breaking and easy. So that's a couple of other things that you could do with that. Now, before we start with our lights, we're going to talk about our colors. Now, this obviously is a background, and we talked about the Mod Podge. So this guy already has his background on, and look how really great that orange paper looks now with our tree. That looks really, really good. And I'm going to show you what it looks like with the light in it, and that's really nice. And if you had the lights turned off, you're even going to see that the stones are kind of reflecting through, or the light's reflecting through the stones, and you can either put that light or at the top or at the bottom as well. So we're going to set that guy aside, and you don't have to put a background in it. If you like it just the way it is, you want to hang it on a wall, then go ahead and do that. But we're going to I used leather or suede, and just by changing the background, it totally changes the look of the gourd. Now remember, you don't have to have expensive leather. This is actually an old leather dress from the thrift store. So look about recycling your leather pieces as well. Now I'm probably going to use this brown. I kind of like that. This was remnants from Leather Jacket Company that made their own jackets. And I've also used the inside. I really like the inside of these too. They kind of give it a nice kind of suede feel. You can use whatever you want. Just remember, when we get the light in there, you want something that is not going to get too warm with that. So those are some different ideas for the back. One once you've decided on your background, and then you can go ahead and decide if you're going to use a light. Now, I used a little clip light. We're looking at picking these up to be able to sell them on our website, so check them out at miriamjoy.com or send us an email to see if you have them, or if we have them, or if you would like them. Now, you want to make sure that they don't get real warm. When I'm working with these, I plugged them in, I held them for a while. They were always where I could hold on to them, because you don't want something that's going to get so hot that's going to start a fire. If you were doing this in a bigger one and you had some bigger lamps, and you could look at using some of the bigger lamp stands that some of the other gourd artists have available, that's totally up to you. But before putting your light in, you've also got to kind of think about what type of stand, or if you want to just hang it on the wall. We've got some different stands that I'm kind of showing here, different wood stands. Now, we'll bring this in. This is a flower, a wire wrapped flower, teardrop flower. I'm not sure quite what the name is. The class that we're working on as well, and it's kind of similar. So look forward to that, and keep checking back to make sure we have that class available. But what I'm going to be using, and I really like, and we live in the forest, but there's always wood pieces everywhere you go, even in the city, just look for them. And I want to pick wood pieces that I can kind of use with my light as well, so that my light will go out the back and you don't see the cord coming down. And if you have a piece like this that's going to slide a little bit, put a little bit of a silicone dot. They have the little dot, or the little, they're not feet, but they're little rubber dots that you can put on things so they don't slip. You can look for that in the home section of your store. But you can set that on there and see kind of how that goes. But that's how I like to do it, because you're incorporating the wood with the tree, and that kind of gives it a real earthy feel. So that's what I kind of like on these, because it comes in behind the the wood, and you can take that out without seeing it. So that's really nice. Now, if you are going to do a wall hanging, you might want to do this a little bit different. You're going to decide if you want your light on the top or the bottom, if you want to put it there. And the same way with these, if you think that it would go better up at the top and show through the tree, then you just bring your cord kind of round on the side. Or if you like it at the bottom, whatever way you think that works for you. But so your cord would be flush. Wherever you would take that out, you would kind of drill that part out so your cord could leave the gourd, but it would still be flush and you wouldn't bounce that up against the wall. So think about that if you're doing a wall hanger. Now, the next thing I do with these lights is I take a metal wire cutter and I remove the clip part, because I'm not using this part and I want it a little bit more flush. That's totally up to you if you do that or not decide to do that. And you don't have to turn these into lamps. If you like them just the way they are, just leave them just the way they are. I kind of played with my light a bit, and if I put it down here, the roots really shined up here, but if I put it here, then the stones really lit up. So I really like that better. But what I want you to think about is where your light is. Don't think about this being your light. Your light comes from this area here, so you want to kind of even that off in the middle there. So right in the middle of your tree or wherever you would like the light to come out. And then we're going to go ahead and put our light in with quickwood. And if you have a better way of doing that, feel free to do that. But there's a couple reasons I'm going to use the quickwood. And quickwood is a 2-part epoxy. We do sell that at miriamjoy.com. First thing you're doing when you work with quickwood is remove your jewelry, because it'll be rock hard in an hour, even in your jewelry. There's your 2-part epoxy, and this is one of those times I'm going to use a little bit more. So I'm going to cut this with my scissors and make sure you unwrap the plastic. So many people forget that. I'm going to spray my hands with some vegetable spray. I know my bottle's getting real pretty there, so it doesn't stick to me. And then we're going to knead it together, and that's what's going to activate it. And you have 30 minutes workable time. You should not need that much time. Knead that till all the marbleizing is gone and it is one clear, nice color. So I'm going to roll it up in a ball, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about where this is going, and I'm going to set this down. Now my intention, once I push this, is to not only get the light secure to the gourd. You don't want the light to show from the front either, but I do not want the light to touch my lining in the back. And also this piece of quickwood is going to keep my light up off the gourd. So that is why we're kind of attaching it all that way. And I also want to kind of bring this down and around. I'm going to attach that kind of lightly there. You don't want that coming over that white part at all. So we're going to just kind of set that there. Now what I did last time I did this is I went ahead and painted the bottom part black. But I think I'm going to wait and just paint it all at the end. The black is just in case it kind of shows through. It's not a big deal. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a second batch of quickwood, and that's going to go over the top. But if this sinks down a little bit, just kind of push it back up. And you can even pull it up if it doesn't quite go on right. Don't wait too long though. The longer you wait, the less it likes to stick to the gourd. You have a lot of working time. It's just don't pick it up like after 15 minutes or so. So now that I've got that all worked, I'm just going to make a piece of quickwood, and I'm just going to bring it over that light. Now, I'm not going to worry about making it real pretty. You can make it as pretty as you want. That's totally your prerogative. My thing is I want it up off the gourd. Don't want it touching the light where it's warm at all. And however you want to do that. Now, on this cord, there's a couple of things that we could do. If you want to just continue using the quickwood and kind of tack it down in a couple places, you could. Another thing you could do is hot glue pieces of material on, but you'd have to make sure that you're not touching your cord. You're just touching the material in the sides of the gourd. So either one of those ways will work really well. And after you get this all done, you're going to let it set for an hour. And if you want to paint that quickwood black so it blends into the background so nobody sees that, you can go ahead and do that. Whatever you are comfortable with. And I want this kind of back away from the opening so you don't see it. And I might let that piece dry really well before I try tacking the other pieces on, getting it to the bottom. Whatever works for you. I've ruined a lot of things by rushing them or not waiting for stuff to dry. So whatever you are comfortable with. And you should only probably need 2 or 3 pieces here. And get it to that bottom where you can take it out. And it doesn't have to go all the way to the bottom. It can go a little bit out to that side. I'm going to do one more little piece, and I think I got that pretty good. And then I probably would also paint these, and you could even paint your cord if you think that your cord needed to be black. You probably would use a multi-surface acrylic paint. Make sure you knead that really well. If you don't knead that quick wood well enough, it will not harden up on you. A lot of people say, what happened? It didn't harden up on me. Well, that's what happened, is you didn't give it time enough to, or knead it well enough, I should say, excuse me. Okay, we've got that done, so we're going to let that dry for about an hour. Okay, our quick wood is dry, and I'm going to go ahead and coat it with my multi-surface paint. And this is Folk Art, and you can pick this up at Walmart. And I'm going to go ahead and use that color because I'm going to go ahead and paint my cord that's on the inside as well, I think. Just so it shows up, it'll kind of blend into the background. So we're just going to paint all around the light. I didn't paint this part up there, but then we'll go ahead and just do our cord and our little quick wood tags, as we want to call them, where we anchored them. So let's go ahead and get that all painted, and then we'll glue our back on. Another way you could put the light in is if you put it from the back or up from the bottom. If you drill a big enough hole, you could leave the side clips on, and just where they got to that, they could fit right there on the edge. But again, you'd want to make sure that nothing is touching your light, not the inside of the gourd, or if you put any backing or anything like that. But that's also another way that you could do the light. If you wanted to put a hanger on your gourd so you could hang it on the wall, before you put your backing on, take a couple pieces of the wire and twist them real well just to give them a nice heavy-duty kind of wire, and then kind of put it up there. And there's a couple of ways you could do this. You could kind of E6000 on while you have it clamped down, or you could use, which was probably what I would do, to use the quick wood, just attach your quick wood here and here to make your hanger. And you could make your hanger whatever size, whatever color, whatever you thought you needed to make that work with your gourd, and then that will hang flush up and down. So we've got a nice hanger on that. But the quick wood is probably what I would be doing, and remember to do that before you place your leather on. Okay, we've got that all nice and painted, and now I'm going to come over and I'm going to trace my circle on, not because of where, I just want to make sure everything fits, and I want to show you where we're going to cut the up for the light. So we're just going to bring this all the way around. It's not to necessarily cut the material. I just want to make sure I've got everything fitting, and we look like it's got everything fitting there. And we're a little bit right here. What we're going to do is take this and cut this up so that our cord fits right on that, in that slit. Alright, now that you've drawn that on, we're just going to cut that in just a little bit, and you can check it and make sure that's going to go through that. You've got enough cut that you don't need to worry about that, that light can come out without any problems. And then I'm going to go ahead and we're going to E6000 this on. And E6000 is an epoxy glue that glues really hard stuff that normally won't glue. And we do carry that at Miriam Joy if you don't have any. And you want to keep it away from the outside of your gourd. You don't want any coming through on the gourd that you painted. And I'm going to do that all the way around. I don't want to miss any of it because I don't want any of it lifting. And if you do have some that lifts, just come back and put that glue in there with a toothpick. It's not that big of a deal. And I'm just going to check any areas that I don't have quite enough there. Alright. Now E6000 takes a while to dry. I'm just going to make sure I don't have any on that outside. And I'm going to take it back over to my piece. And this part, this cut part, sometimes I'll put that over the table a little bit so my cord is not holding my piece up. Gotta get my cord coming down here. To get it into that little slot. You don't want to make that slot very big. And sometimes getting this on there without touching the glue is the fun part. And the white line is just for me to know where I need it to go. It's not a definite part of it. And then make sure you pull it underneath so it's nice and tight. And I'm also going to push down on it. And on this little edge, you may bring your finger up and slide that around. Those two should meet up. You shouldn't have any left over there. And don't worry about this edge part. Don't bring it up against your gourd because you're going to cut that off after this dries. And E6000, you want to let it dry for quite a while. It's not a fast drying glue, but once it's dry, it is really, really dry. And then once we get it all dry, we'll go ahead and cut all of our sides off. But I find it easier for me to do that than to cut it out and then try to place it on to glue it. So think about that when you're placing it on. You don't want to slide it around probably as much as I'm even doing right now. You just want to kind of get it on there and leave it. Unfortunately, my leather piece is a little bit kind of puckered, so I'm pulling that a little bit more. If I have to go back and glue some more later, I will. That's okay. Okay, so go get that part done. And when it's all nice and dry, remember not to pull this up onto your gourd. Keep that glue off of your gourd. And once it's dry, we'll go ahead and trim that. Now that our E6000 is dry, we're going to go ahead and trim it from the leather. And like I said, I made a way bigger mess than I should have on this. And I'm taking fabric scissors and I'm just cutting that right up next to the gourd. And you should not have this mess that I do. And just do it exactly even with the gourd all the way around. Try not to cut your gourd. So you should see that leather. Now on my other piece of leather, it was a dark piece of leather, but this part was white. So I just took my pen and, a Sharpie and the color of the leather, and I colored it that color. And you go back and trim any area that you may have left just a little bit higher that you may need to trim down. Now, if you have any areas that are not glued, like that guy there and a little bit right there, we're just going to take our E6000. We're going to put it onto a toothpick, and we're just going to slide it right in there and glue those nice and tight. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had as much fun with this as I did. Take what I've taught you, make it your own, give it your own unique style, and take it from there. I would ask on this class, since it's such a unique class and we give so much away for free, this is how I make my living, and that you would encourage others, instead of teaching them a method or showing them the DVD, encouraging them to buy their own on our website at miriamjoy.com. We're also going to have the tree kits available there for you, so you can make different colors and different kinds of tree as well. Thank you so much. God bless.